Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Serbia is in turmoil. What began as student-led demonstrations after the deadly canopy collapse at Novi Sad railway station, which claimed 16 lives, have grown into the largest civic uprising since the fall of Milosevic. Protests have turned violent, yet President Aleksandar Vučić insists his government is committed to dialogue, offering even a televised debate with students. At the same time, Belgrade maintains close ties with Moscow, with recent calls between Vučić and Sergei Lavrov fueling speculation about Russia's hand in Serbian unrest. Joining us is Ivana Stradner, research fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and a regular contributor. Ivana, welcome back to TVP World, and thank you so much, as always, for taking the time.
Always pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, so we've now got this statement from President Vučić saying, he'll have a televised debate with the students. I mean, what's the impact of that? Does it mean anything at all, or is it just for show?
It means nothing. He has been in power for more than a decade, and I cannot believe that 25 years after the collapse of the brutal Milosevic regime, we are again talking about an authoritarian regime in that part of Europe. Vučić is very scared because of the protests that are happening in Serbia. And he's doing now everything possible to buy more time. And that's why he has offered so-called dialogue. But, the Serbs are not naive. They understand that these are just cheap words. All they want is free and fair elections. And that's something that Vučić truly fears to offer. I'm afraid that many people in Europe, especially in the EU, meaning in Brussels, are still very naive, thinking that Vučić is not leading Serbia towards another Belarus 2.0 in Central Europe. So this is a very, very serious thing, and Europe should not be naive about that.
No, understood. That makes sense. But what is Vučić playing at? He hasn't declared a state of emergency. He said that, it isn't necessary as yet. At the same time, he's talking to Sergei Lavrov, and he's offering these hollow promises to talk to students on television. What's his game plan? Does he have one?
I don't think that he has a game plan other than to remain in power for as long as possible. And he's truly hoping for young students in Serbia to become tired of taking to the streets and eventually to give up. And I can assure you that that's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, I do believe this fall that protests are just going to grow in number. When it comes to the EU, one thing that he is playing is to try to offer economic deals to the EU, basically claiming, maybe the opposition, maybe I'm not great, but the opposition is even worse than me. And the EU should not fall for that trick, because peace through trade never worked with that administration, and it will never, ever work in the future. When it comes to Russia, this is a very interesting thing, because several years ago, Moscow and Belgrade pledged together to fight color revolutions. And Russia has been claiming without any evidence that actually the West is behind so-called unrest, as they call it. And even the Russian ambassador just a few days ago again accused the West of trying to overthrow the government. Meanwhile, the Serbian government is happy and openly talking about Russian support when it comes to protests. I've been following what has been happening in Georgia, and I see lots of similarities. I would never say, that Russia is fully involved in protests in Serbia, because this is, after all about President Vučić. But Russia certainly has lots of reasons to protect Vučić, because he has been doing quite a good bidding for them, and they would not like to lose Vučić as an ally. So, and meanwhile, Vučić has been playing this balancing game between East and West, trying to please both Beijing, but also Moscow, and at the same time, Brussels and Washington. The good news is that I think that there are leaders in the EU that are waking up to this game, and they understand more and more that Vučić bidding for the EU is nothing more than cheap words. You're absolutely right that Vučić had a meeting with the Russian government, and knowing his tricks so far, I would not be surprised to see another effort to escalate in the region, whether through Milorad Dodik in Bosnia, because that's something he has been doing also in Kosovo in the past, to escalate and then de-escalate, and then to claim that there is no security in the region without him, which is absolutely another game that he has been playing. Having said that, we should definitely pay attention to Russia's effort and their statements, how they're supporting this government, as my concern is also that there might be future violations and future human rights violations and more escalations with protests by the Serbian government. And the EU should really pay attention to do that, to protect students there, because they failed in Georgia, and they should not allow another failure in the Balkans, because after all, everything what's happening in Ukraine, it's not only about Ukraine. This is truly democracy versus autocracy, a new world order. And if there is one place where the EU should show Moscow who is the boss, it is actually the Balkans, because this is a lost call. If we do not protect democracy over there, new escalations will be on the horizon, and there are already foreign intelligence that are warning about chaos in the region. And without secure and democratic Balkans, peace and security in Europe will be in jeopardy. And whoever believes that President Vučić is willing and able to maintain and to protect democracy in Serbia and in the region lives in a parallel universe.
Right. I mean, you see, this is what perhaps would surprise many. You had a delegation of students go all the way to Brussels to talk to the European Union, and the European Union seems to be sitting on the sidelines. I mean, surely it can't afford to do that with a country that is, in the queue for joining the EU, that is it's such a pivotal position geographically as well, and having it in the fold would be a major boon for the EU. But how is the EU going to square that circle? The way that the students are being treated, or completely ignored in many senses, and bringing Serbia in, knowing the influence that Moscow and Beijing have on Vučić. How's the EU going to do this?
To begin with, let's go back a little bit to history and try to understand why Europe lost Belarus. Precisely because they thought, that by appeasing Lukashenko, that they are going to divorce Lukashenko from Moscow and bring him back closer to Europe. That never worked. And they are doing exactly the same mistake with President Vučić, trying to appease him, trying to give him all the carrots that he wants at the exchange of him moving Serbia closer to the EU. But here is a caveat. He wants the EU only because of the European Union money. That's what he needs to remain in power. He doesn't want European democratic values. He doesn't want democracy that is in Serbia, because his ultimate goal is to stay in power. And Europe, let's call a spade in politics. It's all about your political survival. And that's why you have politicians that are risk averse. So no wonder why they're playing safe in the Balkans as well, out of fear that there might be future escalations if they, to put in quotation mark, irritate President Vučić. But that's exactly his game that he has been playing, always to escalate and then de-escalate and then to position himself as a pillar of stability and to blackmail Europe. Carrots never worked. They will not work this time either. And my last point is, you're absolutely right that President Vučić has been playing so-called balancing game between East and the West. But here's the thing. Vučić needs the EU more than the EU needs him. And Europe should abandon that risk aversion and to just tell him, if you want to go closer to Moscow and Beijing, just go there. And then to invest in other countries in the region to join the EU. And believe me, that's not going to square comfortably with many people in Serbia who are realizing on a daily basis more and more that Russia and China are not reliable partners, because corruption in Serbia that is happening is very much tolerated by Beijing and Moscow. And Brussels, of course, they cannot tolerate that. And that's one of the greatest fears that Vučić has about potential sticks that might actually come from Brussels. So as I mentioned, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the end of Slobodan Milošević. And it's devastating to talk almost 3 decades later that in that part of the world, we are still talking about authoritarian government and horrible violence that is happening on the streets of Belgrade. 2 decades ago, what's happening today in Serbia would be on every cover page of major newspaper. Today, given what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East and everywhere else, people don't have a bandwidth to focus on what's happening in Serbia. And I truly, truly hope that Europe will wake up and to protect democracy there, because why are we letting Moscow, Beijing to use the government of Serbia also to show that the EU is a paper tiger? I do believe that young Serbian students are not going to give up because they don't want to leave the country. They want to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there is so much more to explore in this, Ivana, and I wish we could do it now. Unfortunately, the clock has beaten us. But as always, a pleasure to see you and to hear your analysis for our audience. Have a good day.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.